we have been looking at various details, from multiple angles. As Smriti has explained, and as Professor Sudhanshu beautifully put it in the morning, one approach that we predominantly use in our daily life is a linear approach, one by one, top down, linear approach. But as you would have recognized with the design of this workshop, we have used a non-linear multidimensional approach. So there are neuroscientists speaking, there are yogic practitioners speaking, there are regular professors speaking, diverse kinds, diverse processes, all of it leading to one thing. This is a non-linear multidimensional approach, and plus the yoga session in the morning, meditation in the evening, it seems like chaotic, but it's not. This is called a non-linear approach, non-linear multidimensional approach. And this is exactly how values are captured. This is exactly how values are imbibed as well. And this is very useful to internalize. There need not be a direct linear cause and effect relationship to us telling and immediately having a behavioral change in the receiving person. If there is such an expectation, then it's more a problem of limitation of our education with respect to our expectation of how values work. That's why we have been looking at the same thing from multiple angles. Okay. There it's very useful to understand in the morning session, Pravarajika Divyananda Pranaji also mentioned. She mentioned beautifully how consciousness leading to the operation of the buddhi, directing the manas and flowing into the action. And hence even thought is a object. Thought is very objective. When one understands the deeper aspect, then thought is very objective. You are that awareness and you will see gaps between thoughts clearly. Thoughts come and go, but you are not that. You will have a clear distinction which cannot be missed. In the other talks, we have been looking at it from other angles. So in the Indian system, we have been looking at Bahyakarana, Antakarana, inner instrument and outer instrument. And as she also pointed out, the inner instrument is looked at in terms of Manas, Chitta, Buddhi, Ahankara. There are other ways to look at it. One way of looking at it is these four components to the inner instrument. See the usage of the terms. This is not called as I. This is looked at as an instrument. Then obviously the question arises, who am I? That takes us deeper beyond the instrumentation and hence giving us a position of observing the instruments. Now, development of this instrumentation is considered very useful. So when we talk values, it is not to consciousness that we are addressing, but to the instrumentation. So manas, there have to be certain values at that level. Chitta, certain values. Buddhi, certain values. Ahankara, certain values. That's how it's looked at as. For example, Ahankara. You'd have observed this beautiful process where initially a child, an infant, cannot even refer to itself. And hence elders in the family will point to itself and say, this is you. There is some, yesterday Professor Jyoti beautifully listed the samskaras, the Shodasha samskaras or the 16 samskaras. Samskaras are more like social best practices. So these best practices evolve out of collective inquiry, just as we are doing at a much larger scale, where society acknowledges, yes, these are important developmental stages, and hence let's invest in them. Development of what? Of the Antakarana. So you have a Namakarana. Namakarana means naming ceremony. The naming ceremony, if you look at the value attached to it, what's the value of a name? Does value, is there value in a name?
Yes, and there is another one. Social context to how to refer. If I don't have a name, how you will call me, right?
Yeah. So that is just referring.
In a very particular context.
In the beginning, practical.
In the beginning, functional, practical, but over a period of time, your core identity. In psychology, it's very well recognized. Your core identity. Once my nephew, he was talking of, he was in the first standard and he was in a prominent school in Mumbai, and he was in Bangalore, and he was mentioning how one of his classmates, everyone used to refer to him as Dumbo. What would that do to a child in the first standard? Everyone refers to him as Dumbo. It would shatter the child's identity. As a teacher, we look down upon, let's say, our students for no particular reason at all, just generalized. What would happen to a child or student? It's useful to understand the process, the subliminal process involved. So a simple social best practice evolves from an actual necessity, where it's recognized how important, as Professor Jyoti pointed out yesterday, tradition, technology and well-being, all of these are interrelated, and in that, tradition is not mindless. It's a best practice that comes out as samskara. So samskara is defined as a best practice, social best practice. Now, namakarana, giving a name, if it is not scientific enough in terms of addressing the psyche, building up a proper identity, then that would itself be tremendously damaging. So it's part of building up the which component? Ahankara, or what we popularly refer as ego, but fundamentally ahankara means I'm the doer, the doership principle. That provides the anchoring point for everything else. Otherwise, all of them are just processes. But what is the anchoring point? It's the ahankara. So you have social best practice addressing that. And if it is a name, generally a name would be kept in terms of a significant historical role model, or a deity's name, or a quality. That, when it is repeated millions of times, that acts very deeply for that person, the person concerned. A very simple process. When we remember this, what kind of identity would we want to reinforce in our students? That is itself a value process. What is it that we want to reinforce? Definitely we would not want to damage the identity. We would want to reinforce a positive identity. That's very useful to understand as a process. Similarly, the child is referred to, this is you, this is your nose, this is your, so constantly repeated, reinforced. Why? To form that identity. When that identity is it takes time in the Indian psychological system, in the yogic psychological system. It is said that it's very tough to join the nama and rupa, the form and the name, the nama and the rupa. So there is a process associated with it. And the best practices in the process is called samskara. So when this is understood, then you would see the role of appreciation as a value process. When adults appreciate the child for every single step, one step taken, appreciation. Speaking, appreciation. Doing anything, appreciation. And the child refers to the adults. Doing anything, they would come and refer, I did this. Now many people use derogatory language when they refer to as attention seeking. Know that attention is essential for this value process. Otherwise it would not build. It would just not happen. The same process holds good in a educational ecosystem aspect, in an organizational ecosystem aspect. The leaders of the ecosystem, the teachers, the professors, they hold this process alive. And hence this understanding of value formation becomes very critical. And this guides the neuronal process. What is it that drives the neuronal process? As Swamini was beautifully referring. These are just processes, but the driving factor is consciousness itself. That's the drive. It cannot be it cannot be so that the cart is placed before the horse. The horse drives the cart. No. That's what she was referring to.
Yeah, so so you were talking about reward or sort of like, appreciation of children or whoever you. I understand, I think that you can also extrapolate if you're working with a team and you're in a position where you're assigning a task to someone and then you can show this appreciation. But I wonder if, especially in the case of children, would it become that the things that they do is merely to seek this appreciation and not for something internally motivated on their own, or can it coexist in a way?
Yeah. So in this, wide variation can be seen. Some people are self-motivated.
Right.
Some people seek attention. Is there anything wrong in seeking attention? Is the whole idea. Why seek attention or appreciation? It's for this process. The process for it to mature. That's where in the yogic system we looked at a balanced ahankara. An imbalanced ahankara, for example, children seek attention. There's nothing wrong with it. That's while we understand the process, we understand that it is building up the ahankara. After a certain point in time, if you still seek attention, what does that indicate?
It's still not balanced.
It is still not complete.
Yeah.
That might also be looked at as retardation.
Yeah.
Right? If the mental processes are not properly developed for that age, what do you call that?
Right.
Retardation.
Yeah.
And if I can add something to her, when we do not fulfill that desire to seek attention, as Sir said, this happens. The whole life they will keep searching for their true identity, with more and more attention seeking when it's not required. And if in childhood seeking attention child comes to us, it depends upon adults also. How do they react to that? How do they respond to that?
Yeah.
When if they feel that child is just seeking attention, they can guide in a way, they can respond.
Yeah.
Like spiritual friends.
Yeah.
It depends upon adults also, how they respond to it.
And especially
Yeah.
when we are talking of value processes, you clearly see this is a very core parameter. Please.
I thought it was very interesting what you mentioned in terms of the name and how that's a powerful thing because it's repeated millions of times, and that reminded me that one thing that struck me when I visited some Tibetan children's villages schools is that everywhere on the walls they have slogans like others before self and compassion and things like that, and I was like, wow, that's a pretty interesting approach to maybe imbibe these values because again the children see it every day again and again.
Exactly. That's a beautiful thing. See, for example, here we have so many stalwarts. Why do we have these photos in the first place? What do you think? The photos, yeah, they represent the strong values, the commitment to growth of the institution and the nation. And that's why we have those photos. Like it's like reinforcing that core value process. That's the idea of a role model as well.
So ideally, if we see appreciating them at a younger age works, but as they grow and they go out of school, these values or these sanskars which we have made them imbibe, they forget. Because learning comes also with a gift called forgetting. Now it's a gift and it's a boon and a bane both. So how do we actually get them? Because when you do such negative activity or some negative work, it gives us immediate gratification. It gives us immediate result. Though we in Hinduism we do talk of karma as such, that you're going to pay for it whatever is left out. It's a proper banking system.
Oh, here I have not mentioned it in those lines. I will come to it. These are technical terms which I will explain further. But yeah,
see, since I feel that we can appreciate them in school age, but what after that? Because forgetting works with learning, hand in hand. They learn good. As soon as they are getting it, it works. In psychology, we talk about Pavlovian method, wherein they get instant reward. And then finally, when the behavior, when they're not rewarded, it leads to extinction also. So how do we...
Yeah, so let's look at it as a process. The Ahankara we are investing in because we need an identity to anchor ourselves. That's an important growth phase. But right now the anchor for a developing child, where is the anchor?
Parents.
Where is the center of gravity?
Parents.
Outside of them.
Yeah.
That's why they seek attention, appreciation. An essential process of development is also investing in the other process, Manas Chitta Buddhi, where you'd see for a sense of balance to come in, other processes need to be complete. Okay. So, the Ahankara is developing, the center of gravity is outside of themselves, but it needs to be shifted within. For that, other processes also need to be complete. Other processes also need to develop. So there is an essential, the reason why we are dealing with this is commonly we would see phenomenon like rebellion or rebelling against, I don't care.
Yeah.
What you say does not matter to me. No, truth is important, honesty is important, you should not copy. You tell them directly, no, I don't care. That also, it's useful to understand that that's a process. What is the process involved? It is the essential process of education as per the Indian system is looked at as Paroksha Anubhuti to Aparoksha Anubhuti. Anubhuti is experience. Para Aksha Anubhuti is experience through someone else's eyes, the teacher's eyes. To Aparoksha Anubhuti, not someone else's eyes, but your own eyes. You have direct experience. Then you don't have a question with respect to that value. Yes, I see it. It's valuable to me. That until and unless a student feels, they are not going to own it up.
In fact, just to add to this, we as teachers, the Ahamkara, unless it's fulfilled, as we feel completely as a teacher, then it's very difficult to perform our duties. If you're always put down in terms of you don't teach well, you don't manage things well, you speak this way, you're not dressed up well, always if the ego is, tampered with, then what happens is, as a teacher, I don't have the full ego of a teacher. That interferes with the kind of efficiency that I can do. Of course, these are not instant rewards. We are talking about permanent, feelings that are implanted. So some mistake people do, okay, some kind of a punishment or some kind of admonishing or something to correct is fine. But if you tamper with the ego too much, and this typically with children we have seen, when adults give the input that they actually can't do it, actually children end up not doing that. It's not a false sense of appreciation. Initially, even that false sense of appreciation is still okay, but you'll have to regulate that. That's what we see.
From the beginning, we have been talking of intelligent regulation. That is the key.
Guidance.
Yeah. So it is to do with, our own judgment as well, improving our sense of judgment, assessment. So that's why we are focusing on understanding the subliminal process. So ahankara is looked at in those terms. So someone who develops into a balanced ahankara, you can imagine what kind of person, what kind of value system they would embody. That is confidence. And for that, they should have experienced it for themselves, aparoksha anubhuti. They should have seen for themselves, yes, this is valuable to me. For example, we have been talking of dharma pradhana, artha pradhana, kama pradhana. What is pradhana? What is it? How do you judge the reality? How do you judge the world? How do you judge yourself? How do you judge actions that you do? As I, mentioned, discussed the anecdote from my life. That old lady breaking stones in the Himalayas. She did not map it as suffering, as misery, as being just caught up. I wish to be free. She mapped it to, hey, you should be happy and hence I'm doing this. So what predominates for you? As Professor Bindukuti beautifully put it in the last few slides in the previous talk. It's like the shift between the lower, regular consciousness to the elevated consciousness. That is the value process that we are talking of, and what goes underneath to build that value process. So balanced ahankara is considered very, very critical. And it becomes important to enable an ecosystem that invests in creating that. Because it is not just individual, because initially it's dependent on the ecosystem for their identity formation. And as part of that, rebellion is also considered valid. An ecosystem that does not accommodate all of this is just too rigid without understanding the process that's going on. The manas collects data and processes, does initial processing. So initially for a child, for an infant, even something like you would have seen when you go close to an infant and wave something, if you have observed, it does not focus on the object. It will look through you. Have you observed with infants?
Yes, they will ask us.
It will look through you as if you don't exist. But that's because even a simple cognitive function like focusing is not there. Object recognition is not there. When an object is recognized, that's a huge celebration. Hey, it's seen me. It's responded. That's a huge development. The manas is involved in preliminary processing of data, and it also evolves. Even something as simple as recognizing this image as different from the background, this image as different from this image, all of this gets built into the manas as we proceed. And the nama and rupa for this manas, this object, this is the rupa, the nama gets attached to it. All of this goes on. And with the value process, we are looking at even more abstract, very abstract. So it's much more complex than a physical process, a sensory process. So the manas is involved in the initial level processing, which is stored. The data is stored in the chitta. Not just this data, but also your preferences, which, as we have already looked at, raga, dvesha. That is also stored, and that the buddhi acts upon for a action, for a decision. Now, in all these processes, there could be, problems introduced. For example, a typical problem is where, someone gets confused. What should I do with my, should I take up this career? Should I take up civil services? Should I take up GRE, MTech, GATE? What should I take up? Diverse options are available. What should I choose? It's a very valid problem. Manas helps us in data collection. So as much data as possible needs to be collected before we take a decision with the buddhi. But if we jump ahead and for each input that comes we decide, okay, this is what I'm going to do, then that leads to confusion. Collecting data is not confusion. As a process, when we understand it, then it becomes much more enlightening. We see, okay, this is fine. And this can be built into the value process. Now, many young people look at confusion as the operation of the manas is looked at as confusion. Collecting data is looked at as confusion. Oh, I'm confused. For example, one student approached me and said, I'm very stressed out. Why? I want to buy a bike. That's a good thing. Why? No, now I'm confused. What should I buy? See, till that point in time where he wanted to buy a bike, he had not looked at any bike. That's how it happens. We have been, morning session, Swamini beautifully mentioned about attention. All of this is there. For example, we are focusing on this, and the AC sound is not almost there. Maybe it's off. But the background sounds, we inhibit that. It's a standard neuronal process. We inhibit that. So till then, that so many bikes on the road, but it's not visible to that person. Once he decides to buy a bike, then all of it becomes visible. So much data is flowing in, and that is seen as confusion. Is it confusion? And only then, okay, this gives this much mileage. This is this. All of that data is flowing in, and each opinion that is being collected is valuable opinion, valuable data. But each opinion, one person comes and says, hey, this is mileage, you should buy this. Immediately, if that person were to jump to a conclusion, yes, I should buy this, then the next opinion that comes in seems to imbalance this decision. And hence, that is confusing. But otherwise, data collection is not confusing. So understanding this process becomes very useful to design an appropriate value, process in place, put it in place. Where these are not looked at as confusion. And that is clarity. Similarly, chitta, there is some process, as she mentioned, there is a process of shuddhi. Shuddhi means cleansing. We have also looked at in the morning yoga sessions. There is Deha Shuddhi, the body is cleansed. There is Prana Shuddhi, and there is Chitta Shuddhi. So Chitta Shuddhi is essentially the process of, you can call it data wrangling, cleansing data. Because otherwise the preferences themselves, our own raga dvesha, our own conditioned process, limit us from further growth. A simple example was beautifully illustrated by Professor Sudhanshu in the morning. Meditation, our own expectation of meditation, our own conditioning with respect to what this I should achieve, this just linear process, all of that can actually limit us from the experience, from going forward, from progress. And hence, looking at Chitta Shuddhi, Raga, Dvesha, regulating attraction, repulsion, these become very useful to design into the ecosystem. You would have seen such design processes. So it's not open-ended. It's the ecosystem that we provide in which, the values grow, in which the openness to those values also happen. And this is talking of education as value-centric, not education as value-neutral. If education were value-neutral, then all kinds of problems arise that we can see now. What is the exact meaning of value? What are values that we need to focus on? We have not exactly looked at that, right? Because that can still evolve for each system. But what are the processes involved to that? That is what we are looking at. So this is more like an overview of the process without going into exact details, approaching from the Indic perspective, which are very well known, very well established. These are known, as Swamini beautifully said, in the Yoga Vedanta system, it's very well known, very well understood, debated upon, as Merik also beautifully pointed out, even the Buddhist system. Very detailed ways of debate, logic. In the Indian system, you have Tarka. So many things are well established. But that's to do with the content. Fortunately or unfortunately, we are not exposed to that content as part of the regular educational process. And hence we dismiss that. But that's where these studies, the studies on meditators, the studies on yoga, these are now again become focus areas. And hence useful in terms of understanding where things are going, and also for design of experiments. Buddhi obviously is also to do with the knowledge process, the know-how. Now the Antakarana becomes useful to understand. We have yesterday looked at the Bahyakarana, the outer instrument, in terms of the Tridosha, and how that imbalance will also cause imbalances. It's like a highly interactive system. We say psychosomatic, which is very much the norm in Indian systems. Clearly see, it's not like a clear boundary. There are interfacing, interfaces of interactions. We have looked at some interfaces yesterday. But here we are more looking at creating the ecosystem, value ecosystem, in which values can thrive, where it becomes value centric. So there, some of the terms that are used in the Indian system are prarabdha and purushartha. Prarabdha is, you would have heard of destiny and free will. But prarabdha is used in a very broad sense. Now, for example, there is a beautiful illustration from the Mahabharata in this regard. Krishna and Arjuna. Arjuna is a little off. So, Sri Krishna advises him the appropriate principles and logic. At one point, Sri Krishna tells Arjuna, who is not willing to put in his full effort. So Sri Krishna tells Arjuna, Arjuna, what you think of as your prarabdha is the purushartha of the devas. What you think of as your prarabdha is the purushartha of the devas, and hence with your purushartha you can overcome the purushartha of the devas. This is a very useful thing to understand. Now when we say an educational process, we are designing a system where the results of the effort of the student, what does it depend on? Just their own action?
Circumstances.
Just open-ended circumstances? I'm asking the result of the action of the student or effort of the students. What does it depend on?
The teachers also, the teachers comes in the role to play, how
Teachers,
much
okay.
they have given the knowledge.
Okay.
Their own
Own efforts also.
Society, okay, their own effort.
It's very much directed by their own wishes as well, like what they want.
What
the
they
goal,
want.
Yeah.
The result of the action or effort of the students with respect to education. What does it depend on?
Samskaras, as you have said.
Okay, their own samskaras, their own value process, okay. Whether they are hardworking, whether they are focused, okay.
So peer learning is also there.
Peer learning,
The normal term.
okay. The result of the actions of the student, effort of the student with respect to the educational process. What does it, how the teacher evaluates? The evaluation system, who set it up? The students, did they set up the evaluation process?
No.
No. They did not set up the evaluation process. It is the system that has also evolved, but also the administrative mechanism and all of that that gives the result of their actions, their efforts. So it's not automatic, it's not open-ended. It's clearly guided. Similarly, even the value ecosystem, that's how it evolves. It is not open-ended. In an open-ended model, how will you arrive at values? And hence it's important to invest in the value ecosystem. It's not automatic. For example, to invest in a culture of excellence, how will it happen? Just like that? No. For example, we say the IITs are cultures of excellence. Just like that it happened? No, people have invested in it. It's an ecosystem that has been invested in it, and that pays off. You see, it's not open-ended. It's not just like that left adrift, saying, yeah, it just randomly occurred. No, it's not random causation, if we can say that. So similarly, a value ecosystem, even a culture of excellence, is invested in it. And hence, understanding and investing in this process becomes important. So that's where we look at karma, vikarma and akarma. Where?
Sorry, I still didn't get what is prarabdha and purushartha.
Okay, prarabdha is looked at as destiny. Destiny means you are bound to get this at this point of time in your life, let's say. No? You're bound to get this result just because a curriculum is framed each year of BTech, for example. Okay, you'll get this credit, 3 credits for this, 4 credits for this, this, and 4 years, you're done with the BTechs. Does it work that way? Does everyone get the same results? Yeah. So, but that sets the boundary constraint, boundary conditions under which there is volitional effort.
So in the
can say that it is deterministic for her to understand. You know, you don't have anything to do with it. It has to be so, kind of deterministic, where you don't have a free will.
May I add to this? For Prarabdha could be understood in one sense like, do you think you have chosen the way you look, where you will be born, who will be your parents? It was not chosen by you, right? So Prarabdha is something that there is a ideology or system where we say that we are souls and we are born in human forms, right? So whatever the actions we have done so far in many births, that is the Sanchit Karma. So out of that Sanchit Karma, the divine take a piece, or you chosen to be, clarify that, and you take certain set of that particular karma, that is your Prarabdha. And that Purushartha means your free will, that how you choose to be and what you do with that. That is there. So Prarabdha, definitely that the place we will be born, we never say, okay, you're my dad, you're my mom, I will be getting birth from you, right? It's all decided by some high superpower or the divine, we say. So maybe that clarifies.
So, just to add to this, in the educational context, what he means is that the administrators or educators use their free will in a certain sense and set certain ecosystems, and within that the success or failure of the student is determined. So it is our responsibility as educators or administrators to have certain value systems in place so that an expansive experience can be had by the beneficiaries of the system.
So it's useful to understand this in the context of what we are discussing, in the educational context. So just
just a little, first a disclaimer, I have been trained in science, so I should not be talking about this, but whatever I have gathered from this session.
I've also been trained in science.
So first I think what I know from reading text, Prarabdha Karma has nothing to do with our past lives.
No, this is...
It is the bija which comes with us when we descend to the lower forms. Sanchit karmas are the ones which we, of course, gather in our past lives, but I think there is a clear distinction between Prarabdha and Sanchit. I hope I have understood it correctly.
You are right, ma'am. Sanchit and Prarabdha are different.
It's just my clarification, not a question.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's why we said we are applying these principles only in the educational context, because then it goes out of bounds. We are setting the boundary constraints to understand it as a principle that we can, use to our benefit.
So if we are discussing a definition, I think then we need to be a little careful about using terms. I mean, I'm talking about myself as a participant as well.
Yes. It's useful to reason out. The terms that we use are very useful for reasoning, because we reason out with respect to terms and terminology.
But they come with baggage also.
They come with context. That's why we are defining the context here in terms of educational value ecosystem. Now, who sets that boundary constraint? That is very useful to understand. So that's where determining what is karma, vikarma and akarma. Karma means action. Vikarma means that which you should not do. And akarma means inaction or non-action. These three are very useful to, actually set in terms of evolving the value ecosystem. Because otherwise it gets open-ended and confusing. Within this, there is sufficient scope for development of the Antakarana in terms of value process. The way it works out in detail is what we have seen in, as EEG studies, neuroplasticity. All of those are going into the details of the process themselves. Here we are looking at a more expansive view of, this is also a process, but a more expansive eagle's eye view, so that the details can be absorbed comfortably for the purpose that we have gotten together for. Okay. Is there any clarification, any question?
Sir, I have a question. Yeah, go ahead, please go ahead.
Mine is more, I don't know, it's more of a personal struggle question. Like, these are the, let's say, check boxes for a person to tick in one's lifetime to, let's say, achieve a better life. Let's even not talk about moksha here. So, there are two instances which have bothered me always. One was the Krishna's and Arjuna's dialogue. Let's consider that Arjuna did checked all these boxes, but still he was not ready. The God himself or the superpower himself had to come in action to reveal. One is that why, if he has